Imagine this. You go to the hospital for a routine procedure, maybe fibroids, maybe a gallbladder, something simple. They put you under, you wake up, and find out they've sterilized you. No warning, no discussion, no choice. And now you can't have children. And the worst part, this was legal. Well, that didn't just happen once. It happened a lot. So much that it even had a nickname, the Mississippi appendectomy. Let me tell you about what happened to Fannie Lou Hamer. In 1961, she walked into a hospital in Mississippi to have a fibroid removed. She walked in expecting relief, and she walked out sterilized. No permission, no warning. It was just done. Now, Fannie Lou Hamer went on to become one of the most powerful voices in the civil rights movement. You probably heard her famous line, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired." And we actually made a full video about her. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. Now, this thing that happened to Fannie Lou Hamer, it wasn't some one-time tragedy. This was part of something much bigger. This came out of the eugenics era. We've got a whole video on that too, but here's the quick version. So eugenics was this plan made by lawmakers and so-called scientists who got together and decided they wanted to create the perfect race. Sounds real bold, right? Except, who gave them the right to decide what perfect even is? Because to make a perfect race, you first have to get rid of everybody you think is imperfect. And in their minds, that meant everybody who wasn't Nordic. It wasn't even just about black versus white, because not even all white people were considered good enough. They were looking for a specific set of features: blonde hair, blue eyes, slim nose, long limbs. That's it. That was the standard. And if you didn't fit that standard, you were unfit. They would literally measure your head, your nose, your arms. They had charts. They had rulers. They had classifications. If you didn't meet the mark, you were a target. And once you were labeled unfit, they could legally sterilize you. And I'm not exaggerating. This was actually written into law. They didn't have to tell you. You could go in for a routine procedure like fibroids or an appendix and leave unable to ever have children again. Okay, you see the lady in front of you? Well, this is Carrie Buck. And let me tell you her story. Carrie Buck was a young white girl in Virginia who got placed in foster care. While there, she was assaulted by her foster family's nephew. When she got pregnant, instead of helping her, they locked her up in a home for what they called the feeble-minded. They said she had the mental age of a 9-year-old. They said she was promiscuous for being pregnant under 18, even though she was assaulted. They called her immoral, said she was a liar, and even claimed she had seizures. And that was all they needed to take her case to court. Her sterilization went all the way to the Supreme Court in a case called Buck v. Bell. The court ruled in 1927 that it was perfectly legal to forcibly sterilize people like her. And Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote one of the most disgusting lines in legal history: 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. That sentence gave every state the green light to start sterilizing people they labeled unfit. In Carrie Buck's case, poor, white, a victim of assault, and thrown away, that was their excuse. So if you're still thinking this was only about black people, it wasn't. It was about control. They targeted anyone who didn't fit their mold, and they got away with it. And who do you think they did this to the most? Black people, of course, because we definitely didn't fit the Nordic ideal. But it wasn't just about race. They came for anyone they could label as unfit. If you had a criminal record, unfit. If you had depression, unfit. If you were alcoholic or drug addicted, unfit. If you were poor, unfit. If you had a disability, autism, low IQ, or couldn't pass their made-up intelligence test, you were also unfit. And that's the scary part, because I know somebody out there is thinking, well, good, some people shouldn't be having kids anyway. Okay, but it's all fun and games until you become the target. Because at first it was black people, then poor people, then white people with brown hair, then people with brown eyes, then anybody who didn't check their little box. Everybody was at risk, unless you were them. And they didn't stop there either. They went into jails, they went into mental institutions, they went into low-income clinics, the kinds of places where people didn't have power, where people didn't have a voice. And even if you did have a voice, it didn't matter, because the law said it was allowed. Now in jail, yeah, Sometimes they would at least say something. They'd tell people, look, if you agree to be sterilized, we'll let you out on parole. But come on, that's not a real choice. That's coercion and that's manipulation. That's somebody playing God with your future while you're just trying to survive. But at least in jail, some folks got a conversation. Other people, especially poor women, got nothing. They were just put under for surgery and woke up sterilized. And a lot of them were never even told. So imagine going your whole life thinking something was wrong with you, only to find out the truth years later, if you ever found out at all. They were sterilizing men too. If they didn't want you to reproduce, they made sure you couldn't. And it didn't stop in the 1960s either. In 2020 and 2021, they were caught sterilizing Hispanic women in ICE detention centers without consent, no discussion, just sterilized. And look, I don't care how you feel about immigration. That's not justice. That's not medicine. That's evil. And I'll be real with y'all. They still take advantage of vulnerable people today. Let me tell y'all something personal. My sister was in jail, and the people told her, if you sign your rights away for your child, we'll let you out. And that's how they operate. They look for people who are poor, desperate, and powerless, and then they take what they want. You see what I mean? This ain't just about the past. This is about systems that were built to dehumanize certain people, and those systems are still breathing. They focused on low-income communities. They went where folks didn't have lawyers, didn't have education, didn't have anybody to fight for them. And if you think it was just a few people, let me hit you with the numbers. This was nationwide. In California alone, over 20,000 people were forcibly sterilized under the eugenics law. And across the U.S., it's estimated that more than 60,000 people were sterilized by the state. That's not a one-off. That's a whole machine. And this is why we have to talk about this. This is why it matters. Because when we talk about reproductive rights, when we talk about Roe vs. Wade, when we talk about choice, we have to remember, many Black women didn't even have the option to choose. They silenced us. They cut us, and they expected us to never find out. But now we know, and we're telling it. So the next time somebody says slavery ended in 1865, you remind them that Black women's bodies stayed in bondage long after the chains were gone. Because if they could control your womb, they could control your future. And they knew it. And this is why we have to know our history. Because if you don't know what they did back then, you won't see it when it shows up again. And trust me, it's still showing up. The most recent cases we've heard was in 2021. So don't let them keep hiding this stuff. Repost it, comment, share it, get it out there. Because they might not put it in your textbook, but we will. Follow for more stories they don't want you to know. Peace.